What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Live Great Lifestyle.
What up? Super stoked to be here.
Today's guest is a good friend, which is funny. I start most of these off with, this is my good friend, because everybody that I've brought on so far I know. But today's guest...
everybody knows you. There's no joke about it. Everybody, at least in Southern California, knows Luke DeFran.
I like it.
I like it too.
Well, so this guy today is a good friend of mine who we spend a lot of time. We've been to conferences together, and is a professional speaker, a transformation coach. And if you're watching this, obviously the first thing you're going to notice with this guy is he has some male pattern baldness going.
Oh, I thought it was because I was ruggedly handsome. I thought he was going to bring that part out.
My man, PJ, the love guru Dixon.
What's up?
What's up, brother? So we've been talking about getting you on and doing this forever because we always just have these conversations. So where I want to dive in with you is, again, obviously, so people who are sitting here watching this, if you're listening to this, you can't see my man, but he is basically, and I should probably preface with this. PJ's a really good friend, and like really good friends, we break each other's balls.
On occasion, they might, they might get broken.
Yeah, so I'm not actually like mean.
I feel like you're saying that for my mom if she's watching.
In case your mom's listening to this, I'm not actually mean to him, but we just tease the hell out of each other. So for somebody who's listening to this and they can't see you, obviously if you're looking at you, you have a very unique posture.
I do. In
that having muscular dystrophy, your posture is crazy. I mean, you're in a very unique position. And so I kind of want to go back with you before we talk about like coaching and speaking. I want to go back to you growing up, going through that, because when we've been at events together, I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come up and actually ask me like, oh, like, so what happened to him? And I've come up with some crazy shit to tell them, like, man, he fell out of a hot air balloon. He stole the hot air balloon. He was solo. He wasn't supposed. I make up all sorts of great shit.
I've told people that I broke my neck eating a turtle when I was cliff diving in Mexico.
Love it. So, okay. But knowing you were born with this is the craziest thing that after I got to know you, I always assumed that where you were at now with your disorder is where you started. And that's not the case at all.
No, not really, but I was born with it. So first of all, before we do that, for the people that are just listening, when Luke talks about my posture being really funky, think about me sitting in a wheelchair, okay? So legs down on the foot strap, whatever, right, sitting in the chair. But I have such a curvature in my spine that my belly button literally rests between my thighs. And so my belly button touches the seat that my legs are sitting on.
Yeah.
And then I curve my back up. So from my lower rib cage all the way up to my head, I'm vertical, I'm upright. I look, from the bottom of my ribs up, I look relatively normal, except that I'm incredibly skinny.
Yeah.
Right?
You look like, well, when we're hanging out and if you're like out of the chair and you're on the floor, you look like a cobra coming out of the carpet. It looks like your torso's growing out of the floor.
Is there any way that we can put a picture on your podcast of my one of my favorite Halloween costumes? I was Kermit. Some of my friends dressed me up like Kermit and put me on a bike. And I was like, I'm the best Kermit ever. Kermit's got sort of that round body, right? Because of the curvature on my back, it looks like I've got this round body. He's got these skinny little legs and little arms. I make a perfect Kermit.
We will definitely
totally put that up there.
We can do that.
All right. So that's what I look like, right? And right now I'm sitting cross-legged on a pretty fun bouncy chair.
Yeah, you have a really legit ability to do full lotus.
Yeah.
Like every jiu-jitsu player is looking at you like, can I get this hip mobility?
And this isn't even lotus. This is just sitting cross-legged,
right.
But I can do full lotus.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I can't put myself in full lotus, but somebody else can put me there and leave me and walk away.
Which I've threatened to leave you a few places.
Well, I've been left in the bathroom a lot by my friends. They're like, all right, dude, I'll be right back. And then like 20 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes later, they're like, dude, I totally forgot you.
Well, I threatened in our last trip to Vegas, we were kind of talking shit to each other, right. And I threatened to stick you in the bathtub, rent the room for 3 days, and put the do not disturb sign, and you'd be a fucking goner. That was my way.
There's no possible way I would get out of that bathtub.
Yeah, it was like a 3-foot deep tub.
Yeah, I don't even think my forehead would stick out of the tub.
No, you'd be a goner.
No, it'd be all over. I'd be screaming as loud as I could, and nobody would hear me in that hotel.
No, so it's good enough. If I need to get rid of you, I can.
Right. Well, it's not that hard. I'm pretty small.
This is true.
All right, so back to...
Yeah, so go back to, again, the fact that this is a progressive thing that you've dealt with.
Yeah.
When I think of somebody who's in your circumstances, and I've gotten to know you really well, and I get to see like a day in the life of PJ as we've been hanging out this last week, You've been staying with me.
Yes.
And I get to see like a day in the life. And somebody who is so movement focused, so outwardly, about going and movement and being able to hike and do all these things. I look at a guy in your circumstances and it's like, oh man, that would be like such a challenging thing for me. And I think, well, okay, obviously like this guy's, he grew up through this process and you've always been here, but that's not the scenario. There were stages to this, right?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. So I was born with this disorder. And my mom knew something that was wrong right away. Something was wrong right away. However, the doctors wouldn't buy into it. They're like, oh, he's club-footed, or, he'll grow out of it, or whatever it was. And so until I was 3, nobody really believed that something was wrong with me except my mom. The doctor was like, oh, he's just club-footed. But I had leg braces. And I didn't walk until I was 2. And then I walked with leg braces from 2 until 3rd grade. And then in 3rd grade, I just said, I don't want these anymore. So I literally remember Mom putting them in the trash, right? Now, I don't even know if it was just a memory of mine that I created or if this is really what happened. But I know that I said, I don't want to walk with leg braces anymore. So she put them, my memory is they were sticking out of the trash can. And so from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, I didn't have leg braces. I walked without them. Okay. And when I would get tired or weak, I would walk on the outsides of my feet. So when somebody doesn't have the ability to actually walk by lifting their muscles on their legs and by holding themselves erect, disabled people, specifically muscular dystrophy, to get their gait, they'll tilt their pelvis forward to get the body in motion, because walking, as you know, is basically a controlled fall, right? So I'm moving forward, tilting my hips forward so that I can actually swing my legs in front of me. Mm-hmm. So between 5th and 6th grade, I got bronchitis. I wasn't strong enough to walk anymore, and then so I went back into leg braces. But in the 8th grade, I was no longer able to walk. I'd walk 20 feet and I'd fall.
No
and
shit.
Then leg braces, meaning I would literally walk with straight legs, and then my teachers and principals were calling my mom saying, look, he needs a wheelchair. He can't walk anymore. So finally, mom puts me into a wheelchair. Well, she doesn't. The doctor's like, okay, we're going to put him in an electric wheelchair. And I'm in 8th grade. I'm like, but they didn't say electric wheelchair. They're like, we're going to put him in an electric chair. And I was like, I know I'm getting a D in science, but please, it's not that bad.
That's funny.
So they put me in this wheelchair, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I can totally move around. Driving all over the place. I love the freedom that it gave me. I broke probably 3 or 4 electric wheelchairs. I can't even count how many leg braces I broke, because I was always out on the go. I was a Boy Scout. I was trying to climb trees. I was doing anything and everything that little kids would do. I'd skateboard. So I would break a ton of leg braces. I broke a number of electric wheelchairs. I drove my electric wheelchair into the pond one time.
Nice.
Yeah, trying to get away from, I walked around the pond and like a bee landed on my foot. I tried to kick the bee. As I kicked the bee, I drove my wheelchair into a ditch. The ditch caused me the wheelchair to stop. I hit the remote control on the handle, drove the wheelchair into the pond. I fell face deep, in the cattails. Wheelchair rolled over my leg. I was stuck in the pond with the wheelchair on my leg. Had to push it back, climb out of the pond, drag myself 75 feet back to my mom, or 75 yards back to my house, right? And I'm like, Mom, because she couldn't hear me. She's upstairs singing and dancing and cleaning. And the first thing she comes down, she's like, what? Are you okay? What's wrong? I was like, Mom, I drove the wheel. I almost got eaten by the weasel that was in the pond. And she's like, because I thought a weasel lived in the pond.
Yeah.
And she said, she's like, where's the wheelchair? I'm like, Mom, I almost died. And she's like, where's the wheelchair? I'm like, okay, clearly she cares more about the chair. So
you can be replaced. The wheelchair costs money. You're free to make.
Right. I can exactly. So anyway, once I got to college, I gave up the electric wheelchair because I saw all these other disabled people. I didn't grow up with disabled people. I grew up around able-bodied people, so I don't think of myself as disabled. Sure. And so I started playing wheelchair sports, and I gave up my electric wheelchair. I started snow skiing, playing wheelchair rugby. And I just figured if I've got to be disabled, I want to be like the paraplegics, the guys who push the manual wheelchairs. So I started playing wheelchair sports and gave up my electric wheelchair and never went back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as long as I can. Even recently, I think 2 or 3 years ago. No, it's probably longer than that. I can't remember. It's been a while. I know, it was 2001. I woke up one morning and I lost the use of my shoulders, literally the day before.
That's crazy.
Because it's a progressive disorder, right? Mm-hmm. I was only supposed to live until I was 7. And I turned 49 this year. So I could literally, one day I could hold a bar of soap in each hand and hold my arms straight out in front of me, shoulder height, slightly higher than shoulder height. I could switch a bar from one hand to the other, no problem. The next morning, I had no shoulders, I had no hands.
That's crazy.
Gone overnight.
Yeah. So how do you like? That's incredible to me, because we were just before we sat down to do this, we were at a coffee shop and we are literally talking about as I like move something for you, and I'm like, fuck, man, it'd be nice to have working hands, wouldn't it? Like arms that worked. Like what a useful thing to have in your day-to-day existence.
Well, remember when we were on the elevator in Vegas recently, right? And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. You look down at me, and Luke is like, if anybody hasn't met Luke, he's like an Adonis, right?
That's why I hang out with this guy. He like builds my ego.
6'2" or something like that, in perfect shape, right? The guy's way too beautiful.
Jesus.
And I'm standing next to him, sitting, right? I'm in my chair. I'm all of 4 feet tall in my wheelchair, standing next to like an Olympic god.
Oh, God,
and he looks
stop.
down. He looks down at me and he goes, "Yeah, you're pretty much my nightmare." And he just started laughing.
Dude, it's true.
And it wasn't because there was not, what's great is there's this Japanese koan. This is, what's the sound of one hand clapping, right? It's koan is like a Japanese riddle.
Okay.
So this statement, what's the sound of one hand clapping, right? And the answer is silence, because without the other hand, there's nothing for it to clap against. So minus the ego inside of me, right? I didn't have anything for that statement to clap up against. So it was hilarious to me, because I totally knew exactly where you're coming from. You're like, this has nothing to do with me at all.
Right.
You're like, if I was in your condition, that would be really hard for me because of
I
where I am.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's again, it is. That would be like my nightmare. I mean, I think about not all, but like many of the things that bring me joy, happiness, and again, you haven't been limited. Like, you haven't allowed this to limit you from getting some of these, but like exploration, sports, activity, but to like, for me to step into that now and develop like the same mindset you have to have gone forward through this, I'm like, I don't know that I'd be there. And that's what I think is incredible about the fact that it is progressive, and that you did have a moment in time where all of a sudden it's like, oh, arms are gone.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like now, like, because that's, as we were talking today, like just simple little things of like trying to pull the coffee closer to you with your mouth.
Yeah.
And to have that level of, to be honest, limitation, like, oh God, that's like the most, that would be like my nightmare. And I mean, I say it out of love to you, because obviously I can't say that to you. I love you to death. But it's incredible to me when I look at you and know that you to go through it as a progression. Because it'd be one thing if like, oh, I was born this way, I never knew anything different. Yeah. But that's not the case. There was this moment in time, one day, where you lose your arms. Like, that's crazy.
It literally was overnight.
Did you have...
I woke up and it was gone, and it was the hardest evolution of my disorder.
That's what
because
I was gonna say.
That particular time when I lost so much, I was like, I was like 30 something at the time, and when I lost that much overnight, like I had, probably 2 or 3 months where I would periodically cry. I was afraid that I was going to die. I was like, this is it. Like, I'm not ready to die. There's still so much to do.
Sure.
And at that point, like, I've already lived, 20 some years longer than I was supposed to, 30 some years longer than I was supposed to, but I still wasn't ready. You know what I mean? Like, sure, I was on borrowed time, but you just don't ever want to go. You know, there was this one time when I was climbing in the Grand Canyon with some of my friends, and I love this story.
Yeah, it's good.
So when I go to the Grand Canyon, I don't go to the Grand Canyon like other people, right? I go to the Grand Canyon, and we look in, we're like, okay, that's a really cool place. And so I climb on my friend's back, we throw my wheelchair under a bush or a tree, and we climb up and over the rail and down into the Grand Canyon.
Love it.
So at one point, one of my best friends, Jeff Christian, is holding me by my wrists, literally holding me by my wrists, and he squats. He's holding me by my wrists. He squats, hangs me over the edge of the Grand Canyon, and he goes, "Okay, Tim, I'm going to drop him." And Tim is 2.5 to 3 feet below me. Tim's your height, even maybe a little taller. And Tim's standing on a ledge. It's probably, 25, 30 degree incline. He's kicked off most of the gravel, and most of the gravel.
Very safe.
Yeah, very safe. And the ledge is probably 12 or 14 inches wide. It's not very big at all. Had Tim missed, right, I would have hit the ledge, cut myself open. Tim probably would have fallen too. We probably would have fallen a half mile before we hit anything. Jeff goes, "Okay, Tim, on 3, I'm going to drop him. 1, 2, 3.
Awesome.
And this is not my life.
Yeah.
This is how I live, right? So I don't let my disability get in the way. And so he drops me. Luckily, Tim catches me. And as Tim catches me, he pulls me to his chest, squeezes us between 2 giant boulders, walks us out towards the ledge. As we get out towards the ledge that we're planning on sitting on and just looking around, he slips and falls on his butt and his back, and his feet, we slide literally to the edge, and his feet and ankles go over the edge. That's living. Because in that moment, we're like, we could really die right now. you know? And so in that moment when you really feel like you could die, that's the moment when you really want to live. And so when I lost my arms, that was where I was like, I'm not ready to die yet. I've been taking this for granted. Like, I still want to live. I still want to experience life. And so for 2 or 3 months, I was like worried that this was it. But as you reach this sort of homeostasis, that your body just goes back into balance, you figure out how to do it. You know, like I had to pee bad that morning, but I had to figure out how to get onto the toilet to go to the bathroom. You know, and I was able to figure it out. But it took me probably an hour to be able to get up on the side of the tub and then cross over to the to the toilet. But you know, you figure out a way. Like, life wants to live.
Yeah.
You know, life wants to live. I want to live.
I love it, man.
I'm fortunate, and it comes from my mom, right?
I was gonna ask, like, growing up, obviously, you were encouraged to like persevere through these things.
Yeah.
To where even with the state you're at now, you've traveled to Japan by yourself. Like there is no limits on what you're doing, which is like what's so dope about it, and which is what like is hilarious. Where, you know, I drop you off somewhere and I'm like, you good? Yeah, okay, all right, he's got this.
So it's funny, like my first trip to Japan, right? I have traveled to Japan by myself, but here's the funny thing: the very first time I went to Japan, I was by myself, and I got in the aisle, and they gave me the whole row to myself. And
because you're huge, dude.
That would massive, right? I weighed like 75, 80 pounds. They gave me 3 seats completely by myself. There were 3 people squeezed together behind me, and I had awesome. These wonderful Korean and Japanese airline attendants like serving me and bringing me food and drinks.
That's funny.
So I just laid down and I slept like the entire trip, you know. And I felt so bad for the people behind me, but thought, well, I'm going to take advantage of it.
Oh yeah.
So the smallest person on the plane had the most space.
You're the guy I'd be looking for to, like, when I come on a flight. I'm like, you know, when it's like if Southwest, you pick your own seat.
Yes.
I'm looking for somebody like you. I'm like, sweet.
Well,
I usually get stuck between like 2 lumberjacks from the Midwest. They're like 6'4", 260. I was on a flight one day with 2 guys like that where they were so broad they sat in front of me, and their shoulders went in front of me. So I was like I felt like I was in a roller coaster where I was like strapped in because their shoulders came like across my pecs, and I was like behind them because they were so thick. And I'm like, how did this happen? Like, let me get next to my man PJ.
And you were probably like sweating.
Oh, dude, it's terrible. I mean, I feel bad for them because they're like legit like giant people. They're like 6'5", 250 pound dudes that have to be super uncomfortable on a plane.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really appreciating being in the middle between them.
I'm actually very fortunate because when I ride Southwest, for example, I'll sit cross-legged, and I always try to sit next to the window. It gives me a little bit of extra space when I sit cross-legged, so my foot isn't kicking anybody. And even if it does, like, I don't walk on my feet, so it's not dirty.
Yeah.
You know. But almost never will anybody sit beside me.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm not offended by that. Sometimes people are like, hey, you mind if I sit by you? Sure. But if the plane's not full, I almost always have space next to me. So
that's do you remember when we were at Thrive? Nick, a guy who spoke, who also has a disability.
Yes.
He was saying the same thing, that like somebody wouldn't sit by him, and I'm like, that's crazy, man. Like, that's the best seat in the house.
I know.
You're 75 pounds. I'm like, hey man, you need that elbow rest? No, you're good.
I know. Like, I don't care. I put it up or whatever.
Yeah. So let me ask you, to this point where you're at now, what's the biggest challenge physically that you have to deal with on like a day-to-day basis?
Well, you know, I can't go to the bathroom by myself. I mean, I can go to the bathroom by myself if my pants are unbuttoned, you know, because I can pull my pants down if they're just zipped, or if I happen to be just wearing like warm-up pants or whatever. But I can't climb from the floor up onto the bath seat to get to the toilet, right? And I can climb from my wheelchair to the bath seat to the toilet. But once I'm there, I have to be on the floor to pull my pants back up. But then once I'm on the floor, I can't get back to my chair, so I'm stuck like Chuck. So for me, the biggest problem is like controlling my intake of fluids and what I eat for the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, I control when I go to the bathroom and based on what I have to do for the rest of the day.
Dude, your like dietary habits are like on point with like a fighter cutting weight, or like a competitive bodybuilder who's like got to hit the right levels at the right time, except you're just trying to get through the day.
Yeah, like if I'm flying to Japan, for example, I won't drink anything until I'm about 2 hours out.
Yeah, it's
because
crazy.
I know, or if my body is really in a profound state of dehydration, then I go, okay, I know that I can drink a certain amount, but if I drink too much too fast, I'll have to go to the bathroom. Then I'm stuck like Chuck because the curvature of my spine, I'm basically leaning on my bladder all day.
Yeah.
You know, which is less than pleasant.
Sure. Well, I remember the one time taking you, I was going to drop you off you were staying with me, and we were like, you same thing. You're like kind of trying to time it so you hadn't drank any water that day.
Yeah.
And because I was like, do you want to like pump it in before you go? And you're like, no, I'm gonna be good. But then you're like, dude, I'm cramping. We went and got Pedialyte.
Yeah.
To get like some fluid in you, but having to time that. I feel like, and that's I always talk about when I talk to people about you, and like if you stay with me, and I always say this, like it's the greatest dose of like just life appreciation because it's like little things like that people, I think all of us take for granted. And obviously like there's probably things in your life you're taking for granted compared to somebody who can't move at all or can't talk or whatever the circumstances is. But you're like the greatest buffer of just like what are you complaining about in your life? Like when I hang with you or when you stay with me, it forces me into gratitude and a level of appreciation due to just your circumstances, and obviously the outlook you have on life is so dope because again it would be very easy, as I said, if I was all of a sudden in your shoes, it's like fuck man, I might be a miserable prick to be around because so much of my joy has been stripped. So much of like stress relief, like wanting to go for a hike or go, like those are taken from me. So yeah, it's a great little dose of like shut the hell up, no complaints, because I look at how you've navigated your circumstances, an incredible mindset. Like did you ever, when those instances happened where all of a sudden I lost my arms overnight, like did you ever get dark where you're like really, did you deal with depression or like being pissed at the world where like, are you kidding me, this just happened? Did you go through that at all?
You know, I think I had some of that in 7th and 8th grade, but I think that's just part of the hormonal change, right? I was more sad and scared when I lost my arms because, you know, I the day before I could crawl. The next day I couldn't crawl.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like I had to scoot, you know, and I could get into my wheelchair from the floor. That next day I couldn't get into my wheelchair anymore, you know. So there are things that I would lose overnight. So I haven't had that dark depression really since probably 7th and 8th grade. A little bit of depression, you know, in high school, a little bit in college, but not like morbidly depressed, you know, just like sad, like gosh, I wish it was a different situation. Now it's more like on occasion I'm like, you know, I don't really jones to be able to walk that much. I don't really really.
Yeah, just get you somewhere?
Yeah, but well, you know, but I look at it sometimes I'm like, I really would love to be able to rock climb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like I'm driving down the road or whatever, and I'm like, man, like if I could drive and walk, I would just want to pull over on the side of the road and just get out and like climb up that or hike up that.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't have that ability. So, but one of the things you said a minute ago is like, you would have had all of your joy would be stripped from you.
Not all, a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but the point is that is the joy actually stripped from you, right? It's the expression that you're using to actually create the joy. But the joy really comes from your how you want to choose to think.
Sure.
Right? So I can be joyful in the fact that I can't do something. So I no longer get frustrated, I get focused. Right? And so when I get frustrated, all of a sudden I'm like, no, this is like, okay, what is it that you want me to focus on? Right? And sometimes, like, I'm a pretty spiritual guy, so I'm like,
totally.
you know, sometimes I'm like, all right, God, like, I get it. You want me to focus. I'm not focused. Okay. Right? So sometimes we're like scrapping, duking it out, you know, but it's not like I'm depressed. It's like, okay, I freaking get it. All right, I got to be more attentive. So instead of getting frustrated, I get focused. And when I get focused, all of a sudden I can get things done, you know. But you have to find a way. Yeah. No matter what it is, you always have to find a way. Life will always evolve. And so the nice thing about being human is that we get a conscious evolution. It's always an opportunity to try something different. You know, well, that didn't work. Okay, let me try this. That didn't work. Okay, let me try this. You know, I don't quit. I don't know how to quit. Yeah. You know, I just keep going.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and yeah, you've done all sorts of cool shit, and like, there is no limitations that you've put on. Okay.
Well, look at me. Like, even let's talk to people about how I sit up. If I'm laying down on the floor, right? If I'm laying on the floor, for example, and I want to sit up, like most people would just they would just sit up, or they'd roll over on their side. I roll over on my side, then I roll over on my chest, and I have to say chest, not my stomach, because the curvature of my spine causes my butt to stick up in the air, right? And then I have to walk my face, literally, I use my nose to push my butt backwards, and then I have to walk my face back a little further, push my nose against the carpet again, which drives my hips back a little further, and I have to keep doing that until my hips reach a point where gravity pulls them into my ankles, and it causes me to then pop up.
Right. Or you stay with somebody like me, who then is an asshole at one time where I literally, I don't know what I was doing, something I was helping you with, something. I moved your leg, and I watched you literally just like timber, and you looked like, it was like one of those, like the punching bag that like
Yes.
falls over, then pops back up for kids. But every
Yes,
once in a while, if
yes.
you get it right, it doesn't come back over.
Yeah.
And I watch you just timber down right under your head. And I'm like, my bad. Oops. Like, didn't catch you. Sorry.
It's like one time I was in Mexico City and my friends were pushing the wheelchair, and we got the front wheels caught in a grate in one of the pyramid areas. It got caught in a grate, and as soon as it got stuck in the grate, the wheelchair stopped, but I didn't.
Oh,
so
shit.
the wheelchair stops, and I'm like, oh, and I slide to the edge of my chair, and I'm like, I'm going down, and I start to fall, and my friends are laughing before I hit the ground.
Well, that's a good friend.
Oh, totally.
That's a good friend.
Everybody else is like, oh, right? I hit the ground. I cut my hand open. I'm bleeding a little. They're laughing. Other people come over to try to help me, and it's not like I'm not offended or bothered. These
Sure.
are just my friends. You laugh when your friends walk into a pole. It's hilarious.
Totally. Of course. That's another thing with you I think about is how much you're, I don't want to say at the mercy, but like even today we walked down the coffee shop and I'm like, here, we'll go faster. I'll steer, right? Or I'll drive. And it's like, you're kind of at the mercy of what I'm doing.
Yes.
And we were talking about the sidecar the other day.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'd really like to do like the sidecar, like motorcycle
Like on a motorcycle,
thing.
yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, I don't know, man. I don't know that I like being, that I want somebody else in control. And you're like, dude, that's my life, man. And there's a level of like trust and just like that I'm going with this that you have to have all the time.
Oh, yeah. Like my friends take me up and down stairs in my wheelchair.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes these are like massive amounts of stairs. And sometimes it's the biggest escalators you've ever seen. Like when we go to Japan, the Japanese hate when we go through because they want to turn the escalator into this flat platform and then allow me to ride up and stop the escalator again. And then I roll off and then they change the escalator back into an escalator.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, cool.
But they get so like nervous and uncomfortable when we just hit the escalators and go bum, 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 bum.
Oh, that's funny.
But like you push my chair, the handles on the back of my chair are loose,
Yeah.
And so they're stripped. So if we were to tighten them, they stay loose. I just haven't bought new ones. So those could break off at any time.
Just send you going.
Yeah,
You're a daredevil.
Well, I want to live.
I love it. All right, let's get into a little bit more of like the work. So you, as a speaker and as a coach, you talk a lot about limiting beliefs. And
Sure.
let's actually, I'm sure I've shared this with you. And, but this is actually like how we first met and kind of became buddies a few years ago.
Oh, yeah.
We're at an event, our mastermind, and we were doing an exercise where we're working on limiting beliefs. And I was writing down. You were sitting next to me, and you're like, "Hey, man, can you put my paper on the floor? It's easier for me to write on the floor." I'm like, "Yeah, of course, dude. No problem." Set your paper on the floor, and I'm looking at you, and you specifically said, you're like, I'm going to jump down on the floor. Can you put my paper on the floor? Which I have seen you when you've stayed at my house, you've jumped out of the chair before. Where I'm like, bro, you want some help? And so I'm watching you, and I'm like, hey, man, can I help you down on the floor instead of like you jumping out? And you're like, oh, dude, that would be great. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. I don't know you, but I'm happy to like just pick you up. I don't give a shit. So pick you out of the chair, put you on the floor. And I'm literally writing down my limiting belief to go through this process to work on this limiting belief. And my limiting belief is I find writing difficult. Like it wasn't I'm a bad writer. I didn't even go with I'm a bad writer. It wasn't even that. It was like I literally think I find writing difficult. And I think we had like 3 sections to work on, like 3 different limiting beliefs.
Right. Yes.
So I wrote that one, and I look over, and you have the fucking pen in your mouth, and you're writing some half-assed chicken scratch that I think only you can read, because I've seen it.
That's not true. I actually have good writing.
Beautiful cursive. And so I'm like, I look over at you, and I'm like, well, that took care of that one. Cross that off. And I was like, that's no longer a limiting belief. I do not find writing difficult. Later, like I've ended up writing for like Huffington Post, became a contributing writer, and like stepped out of that limiting belief.
I'm glad I could help you with that.
Totally, and just out of like being you. And I've shared this a lot with you, and I've often said that if me and you were to speak somewhere. And as a health and fitness coach, I get to, my mission is to inspire and empower people to be healthy and fit. And I could talk and give all these tactics and thoughts and ask all these people, like, who in here wants to lose weight? And, say 50 people raise their hand. I could give the whole spiel, 5 are going to take action. Where all you'd have to do is get up there and be like, who in here wants to lose weight? And all you have to do is be like, sure wish I could go for a hike tomorrow. And everybody's going to go get into action and lose weight. So I found just knowing you, you've helped me get through some limiting beliefs. So thank you. But that's a big part of obviously like what you do as a coach. Obviously, you're not just doing that by showing up as you. So talk to me a little bit about how do you help somebody first, like identify what their limiting beliefs, because I feel like a lot of people don't even really realize they're maybe harboring those. And then what do you do to help people work through those?
So
getting all serious now.
Yeah, all serious. Okay. So, the first thing that's most important as a coach is I actually listen to people, because they don't necessarily listen to themselves. And so they don't necessarily know what's going on. They're like, I'm really struggling in this area and I don't know what's going on, and I want to, I want to actually be able to take this next action, but I can't get myself in motion. And so if I ask the right kinds of questions, then they start to reveal to themselves what's actually going on, right? There's this idea within coaching that you have the answer within inside of you. It's just a matter of being able to ask the right questions. And so I love to teach, and it's really hard for me to just ask questions sometimes, because I want to be like, well, we could da la la la.
Every coach's biggest challenge.
Right,
for sure. I get it.
But the biggest thing, first and foremost, is to listen to how they identify themselves. What are they saying that's making them either empowered or disempowered? And if they're coming from a space of disempowerment, then all of a sudden we just have to change their way of identifying themselves, how they look at themselves. So we should always start by asking some questions. We got to know what it is that they want and what's standing in their way. Most things come from, earlier in their life. So here's the way I break it down, right? Everybody has been programmed in some way, okay? And usually the programming is not, it's not intentional, right? Like our parents might say, no, in our family, this is the way we do it, right? So we just got a programming there, right? And so we don't realize that programming is creating a belief for us. Actually, we create the belief. So, for example, let me be specific. This makes it easier, right? You hear parents say something like, "Oh, well, money doesn't grow on trees," right? Am I made of money, right? So there's this programming that money is difficult to have, that we don't have any money, and so all of a sudden the person starts to believe that. And when they start to believe that, they start to think in a particular way. The thinking creates the emotion creates the action creates the results. So what I do is I help people go back to what they're, identify what they're thinking, what they're saying, and we sometimes have to start with the emotion, right? So what are you feeling? I'm feeling this. Okay, well, what are you thinking to cause that feeling? What's going through your head? What are you saying to yourself? Well, I'm saying this. Okay, where does that belief come from? What is the belief that's associated with that? Well, I don't believe that I'm worthy of having any money, right? So then we go back and we look at what that program is. Where did that come from, right? And then we uninstall that, and then what we do is we look at other alternatives. Well, what else could it be?
How do you? Let's step back. What's that? What does uninstalling that look like for somebody?
So I am a neurolinguistic programming practitioner. Okay, so I utilize that a lot.
For somebody who doesn't know what NLP is.
Oh yeah, NLP, neurolinguistic programming. It is. The way I like to describe it is, if we look at the body is a whole system, right? But sometimes people just want to work on your psychology. Sometimes they just want to work on your physiology. Sometimes they want to talk about the biological chemicals in the brain, right? But what NLP does is it utilizes the mind, the body, the emotional body, and the nervous system. And if we can implement some of the senses also, the more of those kinds of things that we can implement in the change, the quicker the neural pathway in the brain changes. So if all of a sudden, like you're seeing and you're feeling and you're smelling and you're seeing colors and you're having sensations and you're moving your physical body, if we change all of those, like this is, like when I'm depressed, this is how I sit, right? If all of a sudden we change how you sit up and we, well, what were you saying when you're sitting like this? Well, it's kind of dark and, nothing's really moving and it's just like I feel sad and like I see all these trees without leaves. Okay, sit up. Now see the stream running and the sun shining through and can you feel the sun on your skin? And yeah, okay, all of a sudden I feel better. Well, why are you feeling better? Because how you think dictates how you're going to feel. Okay, so what I do is I will, depending on what they're going through, sometimes I'll just take them back to right before that emotion, right? So their brain can go, oh, right before that emotion, this is what I was feeling. Okay, cool. So if we can get them to before the emotion, then we can stop, we can clean up any of that emotion of self-worth issues, for example, like I don't deserve. We can clean all of this up moving forward just by getting rid of the root origin of that particular feeling.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep, I'm with you.
Okay. So like if for example, I use this as a great example because this was a big one for me, is I remember being 10 years old and saying, hey, Dad, how much money do you make? And I literally can see the whole scenario, right? But I don't see it through my own eyes. I'm not like looking up at my dad. I'm standing in the hallway, looking down the hallway, seeing myself, a little 9 or 10-year-old boy standing there in front of me. My dad's standing there, you know, towering above me. And he says to me, that's rude. You never ask anybody how much money they make. Are you asking your friends' parents how much money they make? If I find out you're asking your friends how much money they make, you know, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I was like, I just wanted to know how much money, you know, because I didn't know. I was like 9 or 10 years old. I was a kid that thought that for you to get a job, I literally thought you had to pay for it. Whoever paid for the job got the job. Yeah.
A little backwards, but all right.
Yeah. Well, I thought you went to work because you wanted to go to work, right? And so I literally thought that you paid for it. So anyway, my point is that that emotion, if I look at that emotion and I go, okay, well, that was fear. You know, okay, well, what's my first memory of fear? And if I can go back, but we don't necessarily trust the conscious mind. We trust the unconscious mind, even if you say, I don't know, I feel like it was, you know, 2 years old. Okay, well, I'm not going to have a memory of 2 years old, likely, right? But we trust the unconscious mind to take us back because of the programming it's got. So we utilize that as a way of releasing, and then people almost inevitably, they're like, wow, I feel so much better. I feel like I let it go. Fantastic. And we check everything where fear might have occurred moving forward, and then usually what happens is all the fear is dropped. And if it's not, we go back and we look at that. Okay. Another way is I believe that emotions, this is a fun thing, I believe that emotions are basically an alarm on your phone, okay? An alarm on your phone that says, bing, you've got mail, right? Yeah. So if you get an emotion, like a negative emotion, for example, it's basically saying that you've got something in there that you want to let go of. So if you go back and you look, okay, well, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling this particular way? If you look at that feeling as an alarm on your phone to go back to that situation is the email, and every email, you know, in this particular case has an attachment. So when you open the attachment, you're downloading the life lessons, the knowledge, and the wisdom.
I like that.
Right? So if you can download the knowledge, the life lessons, the knowledge, and the wisdom, and then you can move forward and go, okay, where am I integrating this into my life right now? Where am I integrating it, but I probably could or should or want to integrate it more? And where am I not integrating it? Then all of a sudden what happens is when the brain goes, oh, you're getting my message, and you're looking at the life lessons, the knowledge, and the wisdom, and you're integrating it into your life, great, I can release this. But then I take people back to that moment again, and I go, is there anything left? And if they're like, well, I still feel a little bit of this. So we check to see if there's anything else that needs to be downloaded, or is there anything left? Sometimes it's like kindness and innocence. It's not any kind of like knowledge or wisdom. It's just like, I feel like I want to be kind and innocent again. I feel like that was taken from me at that time. So we go, okay, well, let's make sure that we bring that forward. Where are you integrating kindness and innocence? Where are you integrating it, but you want to integrate it more, right? And where aren't you integrating it, but you want to? And they're like, then I take them back again, and they're like, well, it's gone. I did this with 216 high schoolers about 4 months ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, in Ohio, literally 216 high schoolers. And I said, okay, like, how many of you feel like the emotion is gone? 80% of them raised their hand. And I said, or stood up, I had them stand up. I said, everybody else who's not standing up, is there anybody who feels like it was not lessened? And they're like, no, everyone's like, no, it lessened. I was like, okay, cool. So if it lessened, we know that it worked. It just means that we would need to go back a second time or maybe a third time to make sure you pulled everything out.
Sure.
Right? So literally the emotion is just saying, bing, you've got mail. There's like a life lesson here. What are you doing with it?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes.
Okay,
I dig it. I like the mail analogy.
I dig it too.
What's the most common, would you say, limiting belief? You like that chair, don't you? A little bouncy.
But you know why? Because I don't get to move. Have you seen those vibration boards? Mm-hmm. So I sat in one in Bulletproof Coffee.
That's actually where I've experienced it, through Bulletproof.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Okay, up in Venice?
No, just like there, but like I've been on it multiple times.
Yeah. I sit just like I am, cross-legged, and I'll sit in meditation for like 10 minutes while.
Dude, you come off humming.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
Yeah.
Super cool. It's super fun.
So you like that chair?
Well, yeah, just like to be able to, because this gives me a chance to move.
Right.
You know,
well, that's what we were talking about. You like
my faster moving.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about you like working out, and you're like, yeah. Do I? Earlier, I got to call you out on it. This massive gun, his 16.5-inch bicep. He's like, does that flex? Can you feel that? And I'm like, nope, that thing does not engage.
Here, let's show him. Hold on.
Yeah, let's see that. Let's see that gun.
Right. Boom. Look at that.
I mean, that's crazy when your elbow's bigger than your bicep and tricep. I love how you're like, oh, you're an Adonis. I'm like, no, PJ, it's just I'm next to you. But what was funny is like your lat engages really well. I'm like, no, your lat's working. That bicep tricep isn't doing much though.
But inside, I feel like it can. But it probably is a lat. I think I'm engaging the lat, so I feel it pulling.
Well, it's what do you do? Like I remember it coming into having you in the studio when I was doing some corrective exercise with people and watching you go through like the mental cues that I was doing and like going through like that body process.
Yeah.
Because you do feel stuff.
Totally.
Do you ever feel trapped in your body?
Yeah, not a lot anymore, but I feel trapped. Like, for example, there's this great experience where I was camping with some friends, and they all woke up before me and left the tent, and nobody was like, hey, man, we're leaving. You want to go with us?
Peace out, man.
They just left. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't, and I usually sleep with, like, the blanket over my nose, just because I like to be all cuddled in, but I couldn't move. I was so tight in there, and every time I tried to move, I would, like, slide in there. So I had no friction. I couldn't get out, and I started to panic because I couldn't move my arms. And I had to stop, and I had to breathe, and I had to get control of my mind again and go, okay, what's another way to get out? So yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's usually because I can't move. For example, like if I'm playing with my friends, 3 little girls, and they're like wrestling with me and covering me with blankets and covering me with pillows, pretty soon they get enough blankets and pillows on me, and they're sitting on me.
Yeah, you're getting like claustrophobic, right?
And not only that, they're little kids, and so they don't know, like, I can't breathe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're sitting on me, and there's no, like, air hole for me.
Right, and you can't push them off.
Well, I don't want to hurt them.
Right.
And, after a little while, there's just too much weight. So if I'm leaning forward, like when I play with them, I'll play with them cross-legged like this because here I've got a bunch of movement,
right.
So I can get down and I can push up a little because my back is real strong. But at some point, I'm outnumbered.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them.
Well, I think I think about, Judy, like, think how much I've fidgeted around here. Like, I cannot sit still.
Yes.
Like, I've been wanting to get up out of this chair, like, for, 15 minutes already. I mean, I just don't stop moving.
Right.
It's like, I have restless body syndrome. So I would just, I'm like, God, I got to get up. I got to go. I got to go do something. Plus, I had a coffee. So I always think, like, do you have that, like, trapped moment?
I feel trapped sometimes when I can't move my own feet. Like if I'm carrying something in my lap and I know that if I shift my body forward, it's going to drop onto the floor from my lap, so I can't adjust my feet. So I feel a little bit like...
It's making me squirm just thinking about it.
Yeah. And I'll ask friends, I'm like, hey, can you help me adjust my foot? And they're like, dude, it's like 1/4 of an inch. I'm like,
yeah.
But you don't understand like how much you adjust all the time. There are micro adjustments that happen constantly, right? Even right now, you're adjusting your ankle.
Totally. I've moved 6 million times since this thing's been, and I'm probably an extreme compared to most people. Like, I'm a fidgeter, but absolutely. Or like, hey, my sock's a little twisted, and I want to fix that. And it's like, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's deal with that for the next 12 hours between your toes, driving you fucking mad. Like, that's what I think of.
And like, if I have to go to the bathroom, man, if I'm not somewhere where I can ask somebody for help, if I'm stuck, I could be stuck all night until my personal care assistant gets there.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's why I feel guilty when I don't get my ass up in the morning early enough, and I know you're out here.
No, I'm good, man. So, yes, on occasion I feel trapped, but not that often. Usually what happens is I feel like there's that little bit of, okay, I can't move, I don't know what to do, and then I have to calm down, I breathe, I come back into my center, and I go, okay, what are my options, right? And then I always find a way.
Yeah.
I always find a way.
Let's, you're obviously like a huge meditator. I know you did your 100 days of meditation that you like on Facebook, where you were sharing that journey and those lessons. I would imagine, like, obviously meditation for you is huge because you are internal so much.
Yes. Yeah.
Where, like, I meditate, but meditation is a challenge.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it's like, set me free. I just do a run. Like, let me just sprint up that freaking hill and like shake this shit out, right? Versus like, obviously for me to get still and pull in is less intuitive. But you're a big meditator for sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Einstein said nothing changes until something moves, right? And from a physics standpoint, nothing changes until something moves.
I gotta shift around. Look at me crossing. I'm fucking fidgeting already.
But I'm actually more comfortable sitting cross-legged like this on this chair than I am in my own wheelchair.
Yeah.
So I've fidgeted some, but if I was in my wheelchair, I would have moved a dozen more times. Times a dozen, because I'm just not as comfortable in my chair as I am sitting cross-legged on something like this, you know, so I'm moving a little, but
Right.
so Einstein said nothing changes until something moves. And from a physics standpoint, he's right. But I like to believe that nothing changes until you become still, deeply and profoundly still. And so in meditation, everything changes. When you become still, when your mind stills and your being stills, and the chaos depletes and starts to go away or evaporates in some sense, all of a sudden the only thing left is the oneness, the unity, the connection to everything. So the body doesn't feel like it needs to run. The
Right.
body doesn't feel like it needs to move, because the body, in essence, for me, like, it evaporates. You know, evaporate's not really the right word, but it just sort of it breaks down to its smallest component. So the only thing I'm aware of is the space between the atoms, or the space between the protons, the neutrons, and the electrons. And so you just get to that place where there's just everything and the nothing, right? So don't get me wrong, like, I want to move my body too. I can't wait to get off a plane and push myself through an airport. I love airports, right? And people are like, well, do you want me to push you? Because, you know, they help me out of the seat, they put me in the chair, they adjust my feet, they strap the bag to the front of my legs, you know, and they're like, well, we can push you. And they look at me, they're like, you are not going to be able to get very far very fast.
Right.
As long as there's not a lot of carpet, and I don't even care about the carpet, as long as there's not a lot of padding under the carpet, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a dick when I drop you off at the airport, because you're like, oh yeah, I'm good here. And then I drop you off, and somebody's like watching me pull out your chair, put your wheels together, you know, grab your ass out of the front seat, throw you in your chair, get your bag, and like there's a very specific way, you know, we put the bag on the chair to get you going, give you a hug, say goodbye, and then like I'll always catch some lady like give me a dirty look, like, what an asshole, just sending him off, and you gotta like roll kind of using your elbows to go, and like of course you're somehow we've dropped you off at the end of like the concourse, and you got like 200 yards, and this lady's just eyeballing me like, what an asshole. You couldn't have walked him down, and you're like, no, I'm good. So
but I fight with you about that, right?
Yeah, you know, totally. Yeah, you're like,
so many times you're like, dude, like, are you sure? Like, I can help you. I'll park and walk you in. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to push myself.
Exactly.
You know,
And
when I get off the plane, like, I'm just like, I can't wait to move my body again. So I do want to move my body, but there's sometimes where, like, for me, meditation has been a salvation, because if I can't move my body, then let me move with what I have, right? So in martial arts, you and I both do martial arts. And so in martial arts, there's this idea, if you're going to push on me, if I push back, the natural reaction for human is to push back, right? But the problem is now we've got resistance. So that's the idea of the two hands clapping, right? So now we've got two egos clapping against each other. But if you push on me and I just go with it, then I don't feel any pressure. You don't feel like I'm there anymore. All of a sudden I disappear in your hands. So why not do the same thing with my life, right? If I feel like, okay, well, I can't move, so let me meditate. And then all of a sudden that need to move, that need to move disappears. You know? So go with what you have instead of fighting against it. So many people, so many times people in life are really struggling, and they're struggling because they're like, well, I want this, I'm trying to get here, and I'm fighting, and you know, I can't figure it out. Well, the problem is that they're actually like going against their grain instead of stopping for a moment and going, okay, what does my heart want to do? What's my spirit want to do? Right? That's why for you, movement makes sense, because that's what your body wants to do.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny though, because so you've been here now, like what? This is fourth day you're
3 days? 3 days. I think I came in Friday.
So, like, I definitely need to get back into meditation, because as much as I say like, oh, I want to move, like, and you've seen it from me, like this has been like a semi-frustrated version of Luke for you to like step into. I'm just coming off of like 2 different trips.
Yeah.
I'm like behind. I'm like just been around people. I'm like, I just want to go be in the woods and be alone.
Yeah.
Like that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And like you can see it, and it's like, well, I find, and it might be, I'm trying to think. Oh, it was Adam, a buddy of ours, talking about meditation as like the mental recharge of rest for the physical. And it's like, oh yeah, I totally need that. Where it's like I need to stop it, pull it all down, and get back to that stillness. And it's something that's, I think, hard for people to recognize, because you feel like, oh, we have all this to do to like run through, and we got to push through it. And it's like, no, pull it back, bring yourself down. Then all that stuff you can handle, and it can unfold, and you can do it.
Sure. We can live in resistance, right? Or we can thrive through the expression that's the most natural for our being. And the most natural is defined in that moment for you. Some moments we need to move, so move. Some moments we're hungry, so eat, right? Buddha said, when you're hungry, eat. When you're tired, sleep, right? And so it's really important for you to slow down enough to go, okay, what do I need right now, right? And if the answer is, I really feel like I need to go for a run, or I really want to go for a walk, put everything down and honor that, because when you come back, you'll be nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about listening to that soul so you can be nurtured in the way that you need to be.
I like it.
I love it.
PJ, the love guru.
Love guru.
Back to last little thing, shifting back to kind of the coaching stuff. What's the biggest limiting belief that most people have to overcome? That you, from all the coaching you've done, all the people you've worked with, what do you think is the biggest limiting belief?
Inevitably, everyone says, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve it, right? And so in the explorations that I've had of this, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve it, what we find is that they can't define what it would look like for them to know when they would be worthy or deserving. Aside from everything has to be perfect, right? So for example, a lady I was talking to this weekend and doing a little work with this weekend, actually while I was here, she was into dressage, right, horseback riding, when she was in high school, and she was 14, and she wanted one of these, $10,000, $14,000 saddles, but there's no way she would ask for it because she knew she just didn't have the money, and or the family didn't have the money, and even if she had the money, she said she wouldn't have bought it herself because she didn't feel like she deserved it, right? And I said, well, why don't you feel like you deserved it? And she's like, I didn't feel like I was good enough. And so I asked, well, would you have been better if you had a better saddle? And she's like, oh, definitely. So had you had better equipment, you would have already been better. But see, we feel like we have to be better than everybody to be able to deserve it. But then the problem with the human being is humans see our own potential, right? So if I know what my potential is and I don't feel like I'm meeting my potential, then I don't deserve it because I'm not way up here. Right. We set unrealistic parameters on what we should be doing instead of what we can and are doing, so that we really can allow ourselves to feel like we deserve. And what if we don't have to worry about whether or not we deserve? What if we just say, oh, I'm alive, and by default, this seems like it'd be fun. I'd love to have that. And so what if we just let ourselves have that? What if it's as simple as that? What if it's not about deserving? What if it's about just honoring? Like literally, what if it's not about, well, you deserve or you don't deserve? What if it's like, well, I'm just going to honor what's inside of me? Like if I feel like I need water over a soda, like I don't drink soda, but if I want water over, I'm honoring my body, right?
Yeah.
If I feel like I want to be hugged by somebody, I'm honoring that. Hey, can I hug you? Can you hug me? I just need to be held right now. I'm honoring that. But when it comes to money, when it comes to love, when it comes to relationships, most people will just they'll pull back and say, well, I don't deserve it. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. And so that's the big problem. And it's a false belief because they identify they have to be perfect before they can deserve anything.
Right.
So look at it like this. Like, let's say that for me to get paid $100, I have to do $100 worth of work, right?
Right.
Based on whatever the parameters are for that particular job. But most people feel like they have to do $250 worth of work to get paid $100.
Sure.
And that's the worst. That's because then nobody lives in a space of happiness. People live based on obligation. That's not living, right? And they're involved in relationships based on obligation. That's not a relationship, right? Versus like, what do I really want to do? Can I really honestly say this? Because if you don't, you're cheating yourself and you're cheating everybody else.
Yeah, and how are you going to get there?
Yeah, you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I love it, dude.
I hate this. Here's the thing, right? Like, I hate to see somebody hurt. I don't want to see somebody hurt. I don't want to see somebody suffer. And so when I see people struggle, like a lot of times people say, PJ, your superpower is that you have the ability to get people to talk about anything. And I really do. Like I'll immediately go right to what's going on. I met this girl this weekend with a friend of mine. He's dating her, and so I'd actually met her before, but had forgotten that I'd met her before. So we get in the car, we're driving. Within about 3 minutes, I'm like digging deep into her life, And most people can't do that, but that's just who I am.
Right. Yeah.
And she's like, oh, and she's just spilling everything, like everything's coming out. And my friends in the back were going like, how did you get that out of her? And he's like, I've been trying to get her to. It's like, this is just who I am, right? So I go deep with people, and it's because I don't want to see people hurt. I will go out with friends, and someone will come up to me. This happened in La Jolla one time. I was in La Jolla hanging out with two of my friends, sitting there looking at the seals, hanging out. This lady who I'd never seen before in my entire life, you know, probably 50, 55 years old, comes up, sits down beside me, literally sits down beside me on the bench. My two friends are on the bench. I'm sitting beside the bench in my chair, sits down, tells me her life story, says, "Can I hug you? Thank you so much. I feel so much better." It's like, yeah, of course. So she hugs me. I hug her. She gets up and walks away. I don't even know her name. And my friends are like, "Really?"
Yeah, this is no surprise to me because I've been witness to it where I'm sitting there feeling like chopped liver, watching a line of like 30 people, 30, let's be real, 30 women specifically that got to say goodbye to PJ.
Yeah, I'm very
like,
fortunate.
Yeah, rough life there, brother.
Yeah, but it's just, you know, I'm just really lucky. It's because I really care about people. I really love them.
And that's what I love about you.
And they feel like they matter.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really important. Everybody matters.
I love it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, we're wrapping it up on Everybody Matters. I dig it, man. And if you want more of my man, PJ, at pjswisdom.com. Dude, thanks for chatting because we've been talking about doing this for like the last, 4 times you've stayed with me.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we got to make it happen.
Me too. I hope we get to do it again.
Yeah, no, when you're out, we'll definitely come on. We'll I'm gonna shove some like whiskey in you, and we'll do a podcast or something. But no, seriously, man, I appreciate the openness too, because you shared a lot about your personal life, which is again to me from the outside, getting to spend time with you, super inspiring just to watch you navigate life. I love it, both personally and also professionally, obviously, as a speaker and a coach. I know you're doing great work in the world. So
thanks, man. Thanks, you.
dude.
I appreciate it.
All right.
I really love you, brother. And
I love you too, man.
My world is significantly enriched because I get to spend time with you.
Stop.
Stop. Truly one of the funniest guys I know. Truly one of the kindest human beings I know. And I really wish more human beings and more men were like you. And the world is a better place because you're in it. And everybody I talked about you all the time, and so many people in Southern California know who you are, and I absolutely love that, and I can't wait to watch you explode also.
Well, I appreciate the compliments. This is why I hang out with you. You're just like the greatest ego booster ever. So I appreciate it, man, and I'm happy to get to know you too. So yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I'm not gonna let you. I'm gonna cut this off before you compliment me again.
You know how I am.
Yeah, I do know. This will just keep going. So love you, brother. Thanks for coming on. And
yeah,
next time you're out, we'll jam again.
Thanks,
all right, PJ's Wisdom people. pjswisdom.com. Connect you on Facebook as well, right?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
pjswisdom.com. Head there, sign up for the email list, check him out on his next stage, and bam, that's all she wrote. Thanks, guys.
Bye.